Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guest today is Ton-Quinlivan. Vaughn is the founder and CEO of Futuro Health, which is a nonprofit that provides allied health education and skills training for people debt-free. Vaughn was a refugee as a child from Vietnam and was amazed at the help she was provided when she moved to this country. Between education opportunities and mentors in her life, she knew that one day she wanted to help people the way she was helped. We had a great conversation. If you know someone that is looking for a job in one of these fields that she talks about, this is a great program to look into, and I highly encourage it. Thank you
I'm
for
so
being here.
excited to talk to you today. I loved reading about your story. I know that you are an author, that you have started this incredible nonprofit, Futuro Health, and you've also been named one of the top 50 women leaders in healthcare. That's pretty awesome. But you had quite a journey to get where you are today. You were a refugee at just 6 years old coming to the United States. Can you tell everybody kind of your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Well, thank you for very much, Sarah, for having me. It's delightful to be here, and hopefully, the charting of my life and the will be an inspiration and an encouragement to others on what can be done. So, right today, I sit in the CEO hat, having founded a national nonprofit called Futuro Health, and we're equipping individuals and communities with their healthcare credentials so that they could have their first or next career in healthcare and do so debt free. So I look forward to sharing more about that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting. In my last life, I was executive vice chancellor of the California Community College system, which is the largest system in higher education. And when I had stepped off from that role and was approached by a big healthcare system telling me about their shortages and, can you bring those workforce development best practices to healthcare so that we can open up opportunities for more in our communities? I have to say, I was faced with the conundrum. I mean, I had to face my own fears, right? I was running a very large system with a lot of money, and then all of a sudden they're asking me to go and build a startup, which I hadn't done before. And I fear failure like everybody else. Should I do this? Should I risk? What if I can't solve the problem that healthcare was facing? And so, Shara, it took me reaching back into my life, back to my early days, which, as you mentioned, my family escaped from the Vietnam War. As you know, we have a lot going on in our world today. So it's very similar to that situation. When we came to the United States, I didn't speak any English, but was always very, very grateful to the fact that education was open to myself and my siblings and my family to restart over. And so I feel like the work that I did with the community colleges, the work with that I do today with Futuro Health is all about unlocking opportunity for others. In a way, it's paying it forward, the opportunity that I had when I was young. So many people had helped us get back on our feet, and I'm just really glad to be in the position where I can wake up every day and do that work for others.
That's awesome. I love that. You started this nonprofit in 2020. So, in the middle of the pandemic, like what was that like? Starting something so big with the craziness that was going on in the world.
Well, yes, so we launched in January of 2020, and of course, 3 months later, we were faced with the surge, and it was we were born, I would say, into the VUCA world. It's I don't know if you know the VUCA acronym. Maybe your listeners know it maybe all too well, but it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Our environment is getting much, much more so. And so we launched in January, fortunately, with funding from Kaiser Permanente and partners to, equip people with credentials to move into healthcare. And then, of course, 3 months later, while we're setting up, is the surge. But it also taught us a big lesson in agility. Right? When I was with the community colleges, it was my mantra, we have to keep up with the pace of business. The workforce programs that we offer have to be relevant, keep up
Right.
with the pace of business so that students can successfully enter the workforce. Well, what did the pandemic teach us? It taught us that the pace of need is much even faster than the pace of business. And
Yeah.
then just, fast forward, the pace of AI is also accelerating things, changes much, much more quickly. So we were born into an environment where we had to be agile and adapt. And so 3 months in, we had to, basically shut down our physical space and then move virtual like everybody else. And then our organization has become very dispersed across the whole United States, such that we'll never reconsolidate back into physical property. But we've been able to very successfully, with a network and growing of 40-something education providers
Wow.
across 18 different occupational programs, adults who may have been shying away from going back into education or just couldn't figure their way back into education or a healthcare credential. We've been able that to bring them in, and they successfully completed around at 83% rate. So now, I think we figured out how to meet adults where they are,
Yeah.
to engage them in education in a way that they enjoy.
That's wonderful. You mentioned this just a minute ago, sort of, but I want to ask, why do you think there is such a critical shortage of healthcare workers right now?
Oh, well, here's some numbers. So think these numbers: 12, 7, and 4. 12, 7, and 4.
Okay.
So back in 1950, there were roughly 11.7 working age people for every person that was over 65. And when you get over 65, and especially if you get over 80, your need for care and caregivers increase, right?
Yeah.
So back then we had roughly 12 people. Today there are 7 people for every person that is over 65. And by 2040, we're expecting that to shrink to only 4.
Wow.
So we have an aging nation, and so even with some short-term adjustments and who gets healthcare coverage and who has access to healthcare coverage, it doesn't negate the fact that our country is aging and we're going to need more care. And so this
Mm.
is one of those areas where every community is going to want their fair share in the backyard. And let me give you maybe some stories. So, like Yoshiko had a bachelor's degree, is bilingual, but she stopped out from the workforce after having run a store for many years and raised her daughter. And in that process, when you stop out, sometimes you lose confidence that you can get back into the workforce. So
Right.
she had heard about us and got a patient care representative journey with us, and she was able to go into an interview. There were 5 people interviewing her from that healthcare hospital system, including 2 doctors, and she was able to hold her own, and she got the offer. So, she would have been sat on the sidelines of
Mm.
healthcare, or, Tamika, who is a security guard in a hospital. She, in her 30s, started taking care of her mother who had cancer
Mm.
and started thinking, "Well, maybe I can do a caregiver role." She found our flyer and then became a phlebotomist, which is, the person that draws your blood.
Yeah.
And so she entered into an actual healthcare role today. Or Justice lost his job during the pandemic and always had aspiration to become a nurse, but he was working at a ramen noodle shop
Yeah.
at that time trying to save money. So his aunt told him about go to the website, and he became a medical assistant and has really, I mean, he's been promoted several times in big hospitals. So it's being able to bring people who maybe was interested in being of service to others,
Yeah.
but either didn't have the path, didn't have the finance, or had a lot of complications in their lives, and they're able to transition into healthcare successfully without debt.
I love that. And you mentioned a few, but what are some of the other healthcare roles that people can gain as they go through this program?
Sure, they fall into a broad category called allied health. Now, most families around the kitchen table, you've heard of the doctors and the nurses, right? And even the administrators. But there's this group called allied health, which is 65% of the workforce. So think about it this way. Like if you had a car accident, which I would not wish on any of your listeners,
Right.
but it's the emergency medical technician that drives up to the site. It's the medical assistant that would check you in at the hospital. It's the X-ray tech that would get you ready. It's the blood draw person. I mean, there's a whole world of these allied health workers that have, that are good jobs.
Yeah.
But the titles don't roll off the tongue because they're not everyday conversation unless you actually have somebody who lives in the healthcare world who can tell you about them. So they're a little bit hidden, And so that's why we wanna invite people to think about these careers and then, have the pathway for them to transition into these careers.
Sure. They're a little bit hidden, but they're also all very necessary. We need all of those people that are doing those things. So, I mentioned it earlier, but what does it mean to you to have been named one of the top 50 women leaders in healthcare?
Well, I so appreciate the recognition, but, I think the work that I do, like all of your listeners, is about, working on something that I care about. And
Right.
it's so interesting, Shara, I'm sure your other guests have said the same. It's usually when you can find that space or that issue that you care about that it unlocks your courage, or maybe in a fun way you call it your superpowers, right?
Yeah.
I discovered that when I'm working on issues of education, unlocking opportunity, workforce development, which is all related, I can become fierce, and I can challenge the system. I can rethink design. I can take on really hard stuff that maybe not so popular, but
Right.
it's necessary because you can't expect the individual learner or student to try to deal with that issue on their own. We need to get everybody to the starting line so that they can demonstrate their own capabilities. And so sort of removing all those obstacles, artificial obstacles that may prevent somebody from running the race, um, is what inspires me to come to work. So I'm really lucky that I get to um, do the work in a space that unlocks my superpowers.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that you also wrote a book, Workforce RX. Can you tell me
That's
about
right.
that? What inspired you to write that and tell me what it's about?
Well, that was also a project during the pandemic, and so what I wanted to write down were all the learnings. 10 challenges in the workforce space that
Mhm.
organizations face, and then how they can be solved and strategies to solve it. The biggest misconception if there's a workforce shortage, it doesn't matter whether it's in manufacturing or healthcare, or global trade. It's companies have the misperception that they have to tackle it alone, that it's a
Right.
individual sport and not a team sport. And so I really wanted to convey that maybe you can try it yourself and build your own physician, medical center, and grow your own physicians. But especially in this allied health area, it really makes sense to collaborate. And we changed the focus of competition. Instead of competing where there's a shallow talent pool.
Right.
Instead, we cooperate to build and grow talent, a wider talent pool from the community. And then we compete, employers can compete at the point of hiring or even the point of internship if they're really smart. Um, but we have to collaborate to grow from a talent puddle to a talent pool.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. If somebody is feeling called to make a difference in healthcare, maybe they're thinking about getting more training or, jumping into something, what would be the first step you would encourage them to take?
Well, there's so many good tools out there now, especially, your search tools and your ChatGPT AI tools. So, Google some of the wide range of healthcare careers. And then if you're an adult, for example, then often adults are thinking about how long does it take? How far is it?
Mm.
Mm, And then in terms of my commute, given all the complexities of life, and then what is the cost of that. And if you find that you're interested in allied health, come visit our website. We're in about 10 states
Yeah.
where there are organizations that have sponsored scholarships. And so it's a little bit of a first come, first serve. Just visit our website at www.futurohealth.org, like
Okay.
futuro as in future, but with an O.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking back to your journey from when you came here, do you remember a lot about that time in your life? And do you remember, I mean, did you have a dream of what you wanted to do when you grew up? Was it being a doctor or a nurse or being in healthcare or anything like that?
Oh, I wish I could say I was that organized. I There was one thing that happened to me where this is the importance of mentorship. So
Mhm.
I was in an organization after college, and I was in a meeting with this woman who was, much older than myself, and we were talking about like doing a partnership. And interestingly enough, she then brought it completely out of context of what we were talking about in front of us. And then she talked about, oh, you should think about joining this organization where there's other women kind of like you, because what she wanted to do was show me that there was a broader world of women who didn't compete with each other, who can be of help to each other. And you could see that they didn't take their careers weren't like linear. Men's career tend to be a little bit more linear, and you could see that they had such a range of success um, in government, in private sector, in investing, in academia, and it was eye-opening for me in my early 30s to see, wow, what they did. And one of the most wonderful thing was to talk to all these women who have gone ahead and to hear what all the potholes in life,
Yeah.
especially when you're navigating personal and work and relationships. And so that way I could avoid some of those without having to learn it firsthand. It was great to see their lives unfold ahead of mine,
Yeah.
and just not, that's a gift to be able to see ahead a little bit and be able to decide, I don't want that at the expense of this, right? So, or I want more of this and less of that. So it gave me more agency in terms of how to design my
Yeah.
life.
That's so important. I love seeing women do that, building each other up instead of tearing
Right, because
down.
a lot early in my career, in my 20s, I was often in environments where maybe I was the only female, and then there's one female, then it seemed like, well, there's only space for perhaps one. I mean, we could take this out, but
Right,
the
right.
women were very competitive instead of
Yeah.
collaborative, right?
Yeah, so it's nice to work together. What's your favorite thing about what you're doing, about what you get to do? Just like you said earlier, you loved being able to help people as you were helped. So you're definitely in your element of doing what you were created to do. But I
Yeah.
just wonder what you love the most.
Yes. Well, of course, I love unlocking opportunities for others. I love hearing their stories
Yeah.
and how it impacts their family in meaningful ways. And then I also love demonstrating the art of the possible,
Yeah.
especially for because I work in larger organizations or the context of larger organizations like education
Right.
institutions and governments. Um, Showing that things can be done in a different way
Yeah.
is very important for these organizations to begin to shift how they do the work. As a matter of fact, when I was back in the corporate sector, um, I was a special assistant to the CEO of this company of 20,000 men and women, and I was not doing a workforce development role, but the job allowed me to sit in a bunch of meetings with the CEO, and I kept hearing from the field, and this was an energy company, and the people from the field would say, "Well, I cannot find quality talent from the community." And I knew because, I'm first generation, I knew there were communities that would just bend over backwards to have these
Right.
really good jobs, careers that, maybe less than a bachelor's degree, you
Yeah.
could have the potential to earn six figures.
Yeah.
And so I began asking questions, and then I pitched to the CEO as well as the chief HR officer. And again, I'm just a first level manager. I'm like, we can do this, but we're gonna have to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so, they released me to go into HR to do proof of concept that we could actually build a more reliable, quality, uh, uh, workforce pipeline from our communities. Because what's important is if you're from the community, you're more likely to stay in the community, especially for high cost of living areas.
Sure.
And so that was what they were trying to solve. How do we build a talent base, and especially the geographies, because they were experiencing people coming to train, get the job, but then they move out. They call it the salmon run. like people swim out of the area because it's they want to go to less cost of living area. Right.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I think what you're doing is so important, and I love it. I love that your heart is in it and that you are truly helping people, and I know they are so thankful too. Is there anything I have not asked you about that you want to tell me about?
Well, I have a podcast. It goes by the same name as my book. It's called Workforce RX. And so if you're interested in learning the latest innovations and thought leadership in the area of the future of learning, future work, future of healthcare, I get to interview innovators who are at work in these areas. We're all trying to grow a more future-ready workforce here.
Absolutely.
And it's available everywhere you get a podcast.
Okay, I will make sure when I post everywhere, I'll have a link for everything. This has been wonderful, Vaughn. Thank you so much for sharing this with me and for talking. And this was a lovely conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. It was a joy to be here and spend some time with your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you. I will be in touch soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.